All right, this is a fun one because everyone knows why you should work in tech, or not if you don't check out that video. This one's why you shouldn't work in tech. As someone who's been in tech for 1.5 years, I can kind of talk about this a little bit more. At the same time, I could have talked about it when I was at Accenture because I work in tech technically, but I'm not at a tech company. But when we say work in tech, we really mean in the tech industry, like software, hardware, all that kind of stuff. So the very first one, and I actually did talk about this a little bit in the other video, which is fast growth. Fast growth is actually a good and a bad thing. This usually means that when there's fast growth, it depends, because if the fast growth is in your favor, that means great. But if fast growth is against you, like literally, let's give you an example here. Maybe there's fast growth on like long form content. Great. You're on YouTube. Perfect. But what if there's fast growth and faster growth in short form content like TikTok? What are you gonna do then? Okay, so in that case, YouTube is gonna start to decline, but like if you're working at TikTok, this means it's gonna go up, you know, right? So in this kind of way, that's where it can change a lot of things. Maybe the way that we do things, the way that the ads are done, the way that like TikTok Shop's got TikTok Shop. TikTok has TikTok Shop now. Like I didn't know that until recently. I was like, whoa, what is this? And so that's what I would say is like, fast growth can be to your detriment, depending on where you are on the side. The other thing could be like, let's say for example, retail. If you are in retail, e-commerce is your friend. But let's say during the pandemic, maybe retail is your thing for e-commerce, but like if you're in a store, there's a lot of issues going on within the stores during the pandemic because no one can go out there to work. They're like working from home, but there's rules out there where you can't work from home. What do you do? And that's where there's issues that like a lot of store people end up getting laid off. That's where I would say fast growth in e-commerce could sometimes be issues on the brick and mortar stores. So that's what I would say fast growth could be an issue depending on if you want to be in such a volatile area like that, you may not want to be in tech for that reason. And so change is one of those, and then constant pivot is one of those. Like if you work in a big tech company where you are the forefront, you're gonna be the one that is making those changes, but you also are gonna be in other companies where you're the followers of those changes. Maybe something big happens and then you're just trying to find something or do something to compete with that competitor. What can you do? Like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Seamless, Grubhub, all that kind of stuff. They're competing with each other. There's always something that they're working on together that is trying to be better. So that's what I would say is like definitely something that can be difficult, because when it comes to tech, a lot of times the way that the big companies can compete is through acquiring and also just trying to do something a little bit better than the other competitor. That's why the smaller companies tend to do a little bit better, because they're like, oh, we're already small. Like what risk do we have? We don't have that many people. Boom, do something and that's innovative. Boom. And so instability is a big key part of that, to be honest, is that fast, and I kind of mentioned this earlier in another video, but like high risk, high reward. If there is a high risk and you're going for like a self-driving car kind of situation, there could be regulations, but at the same time, if you're doing self-driving car, you might be the very first ones to do it. Tesla, like, is definitely a great example of that. Self-driving cars sounds cool, but there's also all these regulations that happen as well. There's instability with that, you know? They're like, you never know what kind of big things happen. The other thing could be like blockchain or cryptocurrency can be an issue. Like there's always regulations somewhere. How do we do taxes kind of thing, all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of instability. This could usually mean like a whole industry can be wiped out, like self-driving cars or something like that could be stopped entirely. Maybe like there's a certain incident that happens, like a car accident that happened. Boom, that like kind of changes a lot of things because you are high risk, high reward. However, sometimes it does work out really, really well, and then actually does really, really well. So that instability, that volatility, honestly, my biggest thing about don't work in tech is if you don't want to be in a fast growth, and when I say fast growth, you don't know which direction, that's just something you're gonna have to accept. High volatility, high risk, high reward area, that's where you would go. But I will say, there are still areas in tech where it's actually not like that. And when I say that, I really mean in industry, like tech companies that target industries that don't change that often. And when I say that it doesn't change that often, I mean it doesn't change as much, okay? It doesn't mean that they don't change. It just doesn't change as much until something bigger comes along. This could usually mean like health tech, legal tech, anything with an industry that's really slow. And this could also mean like government tech as well. Honestly, a lot of these, like they just for them, the risk is a lot lower, so they don't want to invest in new tech. You're always going to have a customer in that kind of case. So there's a lot of cool things you can do about that kind of stuff because you get to be in tech, but you don't get the volatility of tech. So you always want to keep in mind of that. But if you want to be in a cool company, if you want to be in a startup that does all these cool things, these are just things you have to keep in mind. And then the other thing is competition. Like I said before, like sometimes the bigger companies are just kind of doing a tiny little tweak to kind of fight against something. But also they usually, this is the thing that I don't think a lot of people know about, and this is something I didn't know about either, is that a lot of times they have these like big things going on behind the scenes that no one knows about it until it comes like, oh, something came up from the competitor. Now we're gonna use it. It's not like it just came out of nowhere. It's actually been in the background the whole time. It's just something that they've been working on. A lot of the bigger companies have something like that because it's not like something that can be pushed out immediately. Startups can do that because they usually have a lot less red tape. They always have like, here, work on this project, and then that's all they want to do. Versus like in a big company, you're kind of trying to be a little bit safe so you don't do that kind of thing. You're focusing on the ones that you know are cash cows. So naturally, innovation's a little bit lower, but naturally, it also means in a bigger company, you might have better talent or more talent, and you can focus on that kind of thing. So, but something that is just like in a bigger company, you generally have that kind of thing in the back burner. You don't really have that really shown anywhere. You also usually have like economies of scale. So more data, more people, more workflows, more everything, more funding to help that make it work. And then the other one is like, personally for me, I've had this experience with Accenture, but it's working with many time zones. When you're in tech, you generally have a lot more time zones to work with. It's kind of different than government because the government, you're probably, if you're in an area where you're working with international entities, you're working all across the time zones, okay? But in tech, you could be working with people, no matter what size company too, because I know people that are in startups that work with people in India or Malaysia or Philippines or Europe, and then all of these areas are like, you're kind of all across the clock and you can't really change the time because you don't really have that ability. If you want to collaborate, you got to collaborate, you know? So that's where I would say, like, if you are trying to have, it's really good because you get work-life balance, but at the same time, sometimes you don't get that luxury, you know, because you get that ability to actually have to work with all the different time zones, which is a good thing because you get to work with many different people. But if you want that 9 to 5, sometimes it's not easy to do. If your team is not big enough, at least, to do that, because some people I know, they're like, oh, this is the team that we work with and we only do this in the mornings. Perfect. But if you're the only person, you're probably going to be working on their time zones, okay? So it could be a little bit difficult that way. All right, this is the hardest one because this one's the one I didn't notice until I came in. And it's kind of obvious, but at the same time, I didn't realize it knows to this extent. You have to keep your mouth shut on all the things you do. There's so many emails I get about internal stuff. And then there's so many things where I know the answer that the client's asking for, but I can't give that information. So there's just a lot of cool things that tech is constantly doing, or there's a lot of regulations or privacy laws that are out there that like I can't talk about because I'm not the product or I'm not the legal team that works with it. I can talk about how we are currently doing it, but I can't talk about where we're going. And usually when the users or the partners that I work with, they want to know what to do about that. And I can't because like our team is working on that. I'm not on that team. But even so, that team, like I'm pretty sure people are constantly like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? What's the new cool thing that's coming out? Can't talk about it. It's kind of like, how's the new iPhone gonna look like? How's the new Pixel phone looking like? Like, what's the new Google Home? Like all those kind of cool things that we all know about those big products, we can't talk about it. What is TikTok doing? You can't talk about that because then if the competitor knows, they can try to do the same thing or even better. So that's like the thing about it is because there's also something called quiet zones, which I also didn't know about. They usually do this like a month before the earnings, and then after the earnings are out, then it's lifted. So you can't trade stocks during that time period. This usually means like, let's say your equity that you have, like your RSUs or your options, you can't really do anything from that time. So it's a little bit difficult because like, what if you want to sell it? But usually you know about this ahead of time. Secrets, like internal information. When it comes to secrets, there's a lot of cool things that are out there. And there's so many emails. Like I would probably say 75% of my emails, I can't talk about it in the world. And this actually goes into one of the issues You may have noticed on my YouTube channel, I haven't done a work vlog in a year. And that is actually not by choice, because there have been times when I wanted to do a vlog, but then I'm like, 50% of it, I can't talk about it. At least with Accenture, there's nothing confidential about Workday Financials Technology Consulting except for the client data. In my case, the work I'm doing can be confidential. So I'm actually gonna be doing a video after this as to like, if I were to talk about my job as like, without all these kind of red tape, what do I actually do? And I'm gonna talk about it straightforward, no vlog, so that way it's not gonna be like super general. It's gonna give you a true, accurate depiction of what I do, but it's just like there's a lot of things I can't talk about. Like even Addison asked me like, so can you tell me like what you're upset about? And I'm like, I can talk to you on the top line, like what it is, but I can't give you the details. But at the same time, I'm just like, he's not the demographic that needs to know about this, but at the same time, I just don't do that. I don't even try. So there's just like a lot of things that honestly, in some kind of ways, I kind of feel like a secret agent. I'm like, I work at FBI and I can't tell people I work at FBI, but also can't tell people what I'm working on. So it's like that kind of stuff where when you're in tech, it's hard to talk about this kind of stuff because you can be working on a project that no one knows about and you can't tell anything about it. Or you could be working with a client that you are working on a really cool project, but you can't tell anyone about it. It's like those kind of things you can't tell your family, you can't tell your partner, you can't tell your cat because someone else could be listening, all that kind of stuff. But those are the things that like, I wouldn't say those are all the things, but these are the ones that came to my mind when I wrote this of like why you shouldn't work in tech. Honestly, I would say like probably the biggest one is you have to be very fast growing and fast changing and be able to pivot and be able to kind of like move in a minute because there's so many reorgs, there's so many changes all the time. There's like a lot more than I thought because I thought it would be similar to Accenture where it's like, you know, it's in tech. So like what possible can you change except for like products? No, even teams changes too. But at the same time, there's like all these cool things I'm seeing like, wow, this is like, when I came into Google, I was like, that's a lot of cool stuff, but I can't talk about it. So let me know what you think. What are other reasons why you wouldn't work in tech? Tell me also why like you want to work in tech and maybe I can debunk it and see if it's a good or bad thing. All right, that's all. Hopefully this is very helpful and let me know what you think. Comment down below. Bye.